Jessica Miller had always been good at disappearing, not because she wanted to, but because life had a way of teaching her that invisibility was safer. At 27, she wore her housekeeping uniform like armor, gray, shapeless, blending into the muted corridors of the Grandeur Hotel. She polished crystal glasses that would never touch her lips, changed sheets for people who would never remember her face, and carried trays of towels through hallways that smelled of disinfectant and exhaustion. She had grown used to being the background to other people's stories. But that night, in a dim service corridor beneath the chandeliers of the 42nd floor, her world cracked open. Her phone buzzed in, accidental playback from a conversation she wasn't supposed to hear. Mason Walker's voice, the man she'd loved for 3 years, spilled venom into the silence. "You're nothing but a pathetic, shy girl who cleans up after real people. At least Sophia understands success. Unlike that loser who thinks pushing a cart is a career." The words hit like bricks to the chest. Jessica froze, hands still on the half-packed cardboard box. The echo of his laughter, with Sophia, his new girlfriend, seeped into the corridor like poison gas. It wasn't just a breakup, it was erasure. Everything she had sacrificed for Mason, her scholarship and speech therapy, her future, her identity crushed in one careless sneer. Her trembling fingers reached for the locket at her throat. Inside was the fading photograph of her grandmother, a deaf woman who had raised her, who had taught her that language could be made of hands, of touch, of love deeper than words. Jessica's hands began to move in fluid signs, whispering the memory, "You are enough, little bird, you are enough." But tonight, even those signs felt heavy, like prayers to a silent sky. What she didn't know was that someone was watching. From his office doorway, 30 feet away, Caleb Rivers, CEO of the Grandeur hotel chain, stood frozen. He had stayed late only to stumble upon a scene he would never forget. He didn't hear heartbreak in Mason's words. He saw it in Jessica's. Hand signs so graceful, so mournful, they pierced him with memories of his own little sister, Emma. The sister who had signed like that once before cancer stole her voice, then her life. For the first time in years, Caleb Rivers felt something break inside him. And for Jessica Miller, that moment of humiliation was the seed of something she could not yet imagine. Part 2. The breaking point. The next morning arrived, gray and cold. Jessica sat in the break room staring at untouched oatmeal. Resignation letter scribbled on a napkin beside her. Her friend Mandy slid into the chair opposite. "Girl, you look like someone stole your last dollar and your favorite sweater." Jessica whispered, "I'm quitting." Mandy's fork clattered. "What? Jess, why?" The words spilled out in fragments. Mason's betrayal, the wasted years, the degree she gave up, the shame of being invisible. "I gave up my future for him, Mandy. And he called me pathetic." Mandy clasped her hand. "Honey, he was never worthy. Don't let his poison erase your gift. You were born to help people." But Jessica's hands moved unconsciously, signing her despair. Maybe he's right. Maybe I don't belong. Neither of them saw Henry Grant, the maintenance supervisor, standing at the door. At 68, Henry had worked at the Grandeur for 4 decades. He stepped inside, eyes soft. "I've watched you practice sign language alone in the laundry room." "Jessica," he said quietly, "you've got more to give than you realize." Jessica blinked. She had never known anyone noticed, but just as hope flickered, Mason reappeared. He stormed into the service corridor days later. Designer jacket flashing, voice raised for maximum humiliation. He grabbed her arm, accused her of lies, called her a failure in front of staff. "You're nothing without me," shouted as security dragged him out. The incident ended with Mason banned from the hotel but Jessica written up for allowing unauthorized access. That night, she sat under the harsh lights of Patricia Williams's office. Her supervisor's voice soft but firm. "One more incident like this, Jessica, and we'll have to terminate." Her world shrank. Mason had destroyed her heart, and now her career was dangling by a thread. In the supply closet, Jessica wept over her resignation letter. Henry found her, handed her an old sketch her grandmother had drawn. Jessica mid-sign, face glowing with quiet confidence. At the bottom, Your grandmother wrote, "My little bird learning to fly." Jessica's tears blurred the paper. "But what if she was wrong?" she whispered. Henry shook his head. "Wrong? You learned a whole language to comfort a child. You gave up your dreams so others could chase theirs. Don't confuse being made to feel small with actually being small. What you carry, Jessica, that's real power." But her test was still ahead. Part 3. The Stage of Fire. 2 days later. Disaster struck the grandeur. The National Inclusion and Business Summit was about to begin. 300 executives, advocates, and journalists filled the hotel. But the keynote interpreter had been hospitalized in an accident. "Sir, we have 47 deaf attendees." Patricia panicked to Caleb Rivers. "If we can't provide interpretation, the summit collapses." "There might be another option," Henry said quietly. 20 minutes later, Jessica stood pale in the green room, staring at the crowd beyond the curtain. "I've never interpreted for anything this formal," she whispered. "What if I fail?" Caleb stepped closer. His voice was low but steady. "Because sometimes the most qualified person isn't the one with the most credentials. It's the one who understands what it means when communication fails." Jessica closed her eyes. She remembered her grandmother's hands guiding hers. Remembered Emma's loneliness Caleb had confessed. Remembered every silent cry she had hidden. When she opened her eyes, her fear hadn't vanished, but something else burned beneath it. "Then let me try," she whispered. 30 minutes later, Jessica Miller stood on stage before cameras, executives, and advocates. The keynote speaker, Dr. Rebecca Williams, smiled at her and began to sign. Jessica's hands moved in response, at first stiff, then fluid. And then something miraculous happened. She stopped translating words. She began translating hearts. When Dr. Williams spoke of childhood, isolation, Jessica's hands carried the weight of loneliness. When she signed about triumph, Jessica's gestures sparkled with joy. Her movements became poetry, precise, graceful, overflowing with humanity. The audience leaned forward, captivated not just by the speech, but by Jessica herself, the invisible girl turning into a bridge between worlds. When the keynote ended, the ovation lasted 3 minutes. Dr. Williams turned to Jessica, signed with tears in her eyes. "You didn't just interpret my words, you made them sing." For the first time in her life, Jessica was not invisible. For becoming seen in, the days that followed, offers flooded in. Corporations wanted her. Universities invited her. Journalists begged for interviews. But the moment that changed everything came when Caleb Rivers stepped onto the platform, his microphone in hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "Jessica Miller has worked here for 4 years unseen by most of us. Today, she saved this conference and reminded us that talent isn't always where we expect it. Now, that's why I'm proud to announce our new position, Director of Accessibility and Inclusion Services, and I can think of no one better to lead it than Jessica Miller." Applause thundered. Jessica stood frozen. A week ago, she had been ready to resign. Now she was being asked to lead a national initiative. Later that night, Caleb sat with her in the quiet lobby. "What scares you most?" he asked. "Failure," she admitted, proving Mason right. Caleb shook his head. "Jessica, if that's what failure looks like, a cleaning lady who learned sign language to comfort her grandmother, who noticed a scared child when no one else did, who stood on stage when everyone else froze, then we need more failures like you. If Mason couldn't see your worth, that's his blindness, not yours." For the first time, Jessica believed him. Part 5. The Flight of the Little Bird. 18 months later. Jessica Miller stood once again on a stage, this time as the founder of the Jessica Miller Initiative. The Grandeur Hotel's accessibility department had grown into a nationwide program. Hundreds of hotels now trained staff in basic sign language. Her billboard in New York showed her signing with children. Communication builds bridges. She faced an audience of CEOs. She told her story. "I used to believe invisibility was all I deserved. I was the girl no one noticed. But invisibility isn't the absence of worth. It's the absence of recognition. Sometimes the people we overlook carry the answers we've been searching for." The ovation was no longer surprise but respect. Later that night, Jessica received a letter from Henry. Inside was the photograph of her and her grandmother in the hotel lobby. Mid-sign, her grandmother's face glowing with pride. At the bottom, Henry had written, "She always knew her little bird would learn to fly." Jessica's tears blurred the words, but her heart felt light because she finally understood. Her story had never been about proving Mason wrong. It had always been about proving her, his grandmother, right. And now, the invisible girl had become a voice for thousands who had been unseen.